Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads with my partner, Mr. Sean Francis. I am Brian Altunian. Today's episode is going to be amazing. We've got another dad podcaster, really setting a great voice for dads and expectation, leveling up the expectation of dads and our participation in the lives of our children. And so stay tuned for another great episode of Just Two Dads. Hey, everybody. I'm Brian Altunian along with Sean Francis. This is almost episode 170. We talk about it, Manny, because you guys have done 297 episodes. We're still trying to figure out how many episodes we've got in the tank here. So, anyways, we're excited for today's conversation. Before we get into it, just want to say, if you're catching us live on Facebook, please feel free to leave comments. We'll put some up on the screen if it makes sense. Ask a question of our guest, comments, anything you'd like to say. If you're catching us after the fact on our YouTube channel, please hit the like and subscribe and, share the content with friends that if it's valuable and helpful. We think this is evergreen content because go back to some of our past episodes. We're like, man, that was a good conversation to have, and it's poignant today. And if you're catching us on podcast outlets or on WSTX AM radio down in the U.S. Virgin Islands, thanks for making us part of your listening day. We appreciate you all. I want to shout out to Billy Footwear. Always been a fan and a supporter of our podcast and our efforts here. Story of Billy Price, the founder of Billy Footwear. They make adaptive footwear for folks of all ages, as a matter of fact. So anybody who needs help putting their shoes on, believe it or not, it's a task and a skill that's still required to, for some folks, it's the last hurdle to jump over for full independence. Anyways, thank you, Billy Footwear, all the work that you do, and to Sean Hall out in Hawaii for helping us kind of keep on track and keep moving forward. So, without further ado, thanks everybody for joining us. We're already loving the conversation. We had a whole conversation here last 5 or 10 minutes that ventured off into a whole other topic of our collective enjoyment. Before we get into the conversation with our guest Manny, I want to throw it over to Sean Francis. And before we do that, I'm just going to say one thing. I want to shout out. Sean Francis has been selected. He is a 2024 Care Fellow of the Care Across Generation Fellowship Program. It's a huge acknowledgement of the work that he's doing in all supporting caregivers who support folks in their family all across generations, whether they're caring for somebody at their young age or in their older age. So congratulations, Sean, in being named 2024 Care Fellow. It's a huge acknowledgement, my friend. Yeah, it's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm just a couple things to that. One, it's make sure that you have people around you that remind you to not dim your own light and brighten it, because when the opportunity came about, I posted that I am participating in the program as a fellow. And I try to make sure that I don't, sell myself short, because I'm not one to consciously brighten my own light, so to speak. But Brian pointed something out to me, which is, hey, you were chosen. You're not just a participant, and there's something to be said for that. So I appreciate that, Brian. Make sure you surround yourself with people that don't allow you to dim your own light as you make efforts to help others have theirs shine. So thank you very much.
Rhodes, people who are Rhodes scholars don't say, I'm not participating in the Rhodes Scholarship Program this year.
True.
You know what I mean? You're a Rhodes Scholar for crying out loud. You are a Care Fellow, man. I'd say it's an acknowledgement and something that should be heralded and acknowledged. So
I appreciate that. They're a great organization. We're going to have them on the show at some point. I've already had conversation with them about that. And there's a great story that goes along with the process that took place and how it came to be in terms of me having the opportunity as a fellow. But speaking of shining one's light upon the other, we got a guy here today that we're so glad to connect with. When we started this show, we talked about it being an opportunity to shine light upon people that are serving the special needs community. We've since then realized that it's really about that and beyond, and people that are just making a great effort, in society and in the world that we live in. There's a very precarious kind of situation that we find ourselves in as men and fathers, because without women, we literally would not be. So everything that we owe to our mothers and beyond, with the Mother's Day coming up, is immeasurable in value. But what happens is, as men, sometimes we get lost in the mix, and our guest today is someone who is um, doing great work to make sure that that doesn't happen. He has done fantastic work, and has an organization called Fly Dad Gear, which we'll be talking about. He has the Fatherhoods podcast. It's a platform that's dedicated to empowering dads to be present and positive forces in their children's lives. And he also has worked as former vice president at Yahoo, and he's a serial entrepreneur and someone who's committed to adding value to each space that he leaves. And so, welcome to Just Two Dads, Manny Montilla.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you. And look at, by the way, if you notice, the three of us, we all have bookshelves in our background. I don't know if that was something that was planned but
that's because readers are leaders, man. And you can't.
There you go.
You need to. You got to stay thirsty. It's like what I end the show with when I talk about, be more childlike, less childish, stay curious. Man, your curiosity is filled by books. Not to mention the actual act of reading a book versus audiobooks and stuff like that.
That's true. Maybe as a person of a certain age, but I find myself gravitating more toward the tactile feel of the book, and that experience is part of the, ingestion of
it's
information.
The entire thing. You're like, you know what? I miss, and we could be on this topic, all day. I miss and have this deep connection, and I'm getting chills thinking about it now because it makes me think of my dad and my grandfather and stuff. The act of reading a newspaper.
Yeah. I'm just going to say Sunday morning papers for me now. I go
Sunday morning. Yeah.
It's the best.
Like the calendar section of the LA Times. Man, that was my thing,
Yeah.
But anyway, Manny, because when someone is so busy doing what they do and being who they are, they might not realize who they necessarily are, so to speak. So if I refer to you as a hero, you're probably going to, knowing what I know of you, say that that's not true, that's not so. But not only are you a hero, but every hero has superpowers, and those powers come from one's origin. So let's start with that and tell us a little bit about yourself and how everything that you do came to be.
I appreciate that. I'm going to try to do kind of like what Brian was telling you at the onset, right? You accepting that as that fellowship. I received that. But my origin story is one. I mean, I grew up in humble beginnings, coming out of the Bronx in New York City.
Boogie down.
I'm sorry.
I said boogie down.
The boogie down. Yes.
Boogie down Bronx. Yep.
That's right. And to a family of immigrants. So my parents are from the Dominican Republic.
All right.
And like most folks that want to come to this country, trying to make a better path for their own families. And we settled in the Bronx. My upbringing was, as I recall it, super fun, challenging at times, but the societal stigmas that you hear about, the Bronx and some of the challenges folks talk about, I never really felt, or I never really gave too much credence to. It's just kind of part of my existence, and I just flow. You went with the flow. But I always knew through what I saw outside my window and the experiences I was having with people in and around my neighborhood that I needed more than what I saw in my day-to-day. And no shade on anybody that I would encounter. It was just more, I just felt like it just wasn't enough. Like, why should we settle for whatever it was that I was seeing around me, right?
Yeah.
And then, you had your group of folks that were doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And I quickly knew that wasn't my lane. Like, I never gravitated toward the wild stuff you hear about. And I looked at education as my path. And I didn't know how. You guys remember the show Saved by the Bell?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that to me was one of the biggest inspirations in me going and completing high school, if you believe it or not. And it
Wow.
all boiled down to the fact that they had lockers in the school. And I was like, that is crazy. I want lockers. Because public school where I
Wow.
grew up, they didn't have lockers. It wasn't like, I
That's
mean, they
wild.
probably did, but it was sketchy to go use them, right? So like this was like clean, nice. Like I wanted that experience. And so that motivated me to pick the high school. I went to a Catholic high school, had awesome lockers. And it just, that was kind of, I always look back to that as like the jumping off point that led me to college, and never really knowing what I wanted to get into, stumbled into the advertising technology space. And since then, just been able to build a life for my family and I that I couldn't have dreamt of.
Yeah, that's a
Wow.
great space to be in. Now, do you have siblings?
Yeah. So I have, I now have 3 siblings, but growing up, it was my younger brother and I.
And your dad present for
Yes.
you?
Yeah. So my parents divorced when I was pretty young. But I had the good fortune that my father was always around. He didn't just disconnect, which
Right.
that experience has led me to be super passionate about this thing of ours called fatherhood. Because while I appreciated the fact that he was around and really provided some guidance along the way, I always felt like the way he treated my mom in certain aspects wasn't right, as far as like how you form a partnership together. So that was a big influence for me. And then the other was going above and beyond as a parent, right? Something as simple as remembering the kid's birthday, really being present, right?
Yeah.
When you're with them. Those things have stuck with me and are things that I apply in my fatherhood journey every day.
Amazing.
Wow.
Amazing.
So let's kind of get right to the path. You talked about that, your experience in, the corporate world and everything. Talk about how you've gone from, the path from that to the apparel company and the podcast itself.
Yeah. So all of that really started kind of in a domino effect. So I'll take it all the way back. The podcast kind of was the origin of this fatherhood niche that I decided to go down. And so Fatherhood's pod, as you see the link there, was born out of a conversation between myself, a friend of mine, Kay, and DJ EFN, which some folks might know from the Drink Champs podcast, which is a huge hip hop podcast. We've been friends for quite a bit, and EFN was the one that started having kids last among the 3 of us. And as he was expecting his first child, we were having way more conversations centered around parenting.
Right.
And we found ourselves just having a lot of like consultative discussion, but also like accountability discussions, and really just trying to be real about what our different vantage points are, how we've gone through the path of fatherhood. And me being kind of the elder statesman of the 3, having both more children, so 3, and my oldest now is 17. They kind of look to me as like their guiding light. And I was like, whoa, guys, I'm screwing up every single day. Like,
I'm trying to figure it out.
I need your help too. Like, help me accountable. So we flipped the switch. So EFN had a lot of success with the Drink Champs podcast. He was familiar with the platforms and the lane of audio. And he was like, you know what? I think this would be cool for us to do on a consistent basis. And we just flipped the switch and cut a microphone on.
Which is kind of amazing. I mean, it's a very similar path to how Sean and I started this as well. But the fact that just 3 dudes talking about fatherhood from a place of like curiosity, mentorship and everything, that doesn't, I mean, I don't know, to me, that doesn't really happen much, right? Like that's a unique situation and a unique circumstance. That's like my perspective. That's how we are evolving, I think, as men, to be open to those conversations. I mean, that is brilliant. And how long ago was that you guys started the podcast?
We'll be 7 years in this thing in September.
Wow, That's amazing.
I'm sure it went
Amazing.
by
And
like
is it-
that too, didn't it?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
absolutely did.
And I've caught a few of the episodes, and you guys talk about, first of all, you guys are like, they're like, there's no holds barred. First of all,
Yes. There's no filters.
right? It's like a real raw conversation. Three dudes would be having. But also you talk about so many varied subjects, from poops and diapers to organic food. I was listening to the organic food conversation. I thought that was fascinating. You basically just said whatever hits you, or you guys have a whole plan and how the subjects that you talk about, or how does that come about?
It's and for better or worse, it's kind of an organically produced podcast, right? We're very mindful about what our weeks look like or have been, as far as like, our parenting side of things and all the things that affect our ability to parent, right? And so we just come to the pod, we'll have like a quick green room conversation, maybe like 2 minutes, and then whoever has the most interesting thing, that we use that as our jumping off point.
Yeah. You know what, I think that's great. I think it's cool and all that kind of stuff. But I also appreciate it because then it lets us know that we're not crazy, because our first couple episodes were very, like, is this thing on? And even though we've gone technologically, we've evolved past that. We figuring out all these things along the way. We're like, well, we need a website. Let's take our time to figure out how to get that, that's finally live, all these different things. But it's nice to know that somebody else is out there just talking about, you know what, this is a subject, this matters, here we go. And you just have a conversation and you do your thing. There's something to be said for that in life, generally speaking. Not everything needs to be done when you get ready, because certain things you spend too much time getting ready, well, you never will be.
Right.
That's right. It's like you said, it's like anything in life, right? The more paralysis of analysis you have, the slower your climb to success, or whatever that mountaintop is for yourself. So you just got to get in there and do it.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah.
I'll tell you real quick, like,
yeah.
As far as like the podcast journey has been, like, it more than anything, we found it to be therapy for us. And Brian, you mentioned something that is absolutely true in my travels. And it's just something that you can very easily connect to how men operate, right? Or have operated for many, since the inception of mankind, right? Like, we tend not to want to share things, particularly that have emotion attached to them, or sentimental emotion, right?
Yeah.
And things
vulnerability.
around, right? Yeah,
And
we don't like that typically, right? Most of us. And God bless you if you are okay with that, because I want to be there very soon. But it become, and when I found that we were having these discussions and we were open and honest with each other, it was really cool. And like it created like this comfort, right? And allowing me to be that way as well. Like, it coached me into that. And so these almost 7 years has been super therapeutic for me, and also given me the space and opportunity to check myself and have others check me that I trust and admire, right? To then apply some of the things that we discuss into my own parenting style. Like, something as simple as apologizing when you screw up to your child is simple in context and theory, but in practice, that is really difficult.
I totally agree. And we talk, first of all, we talk about this stuff all the time, and we'll have you, if you want, we can get into a conversation, get you crying, because Sean and I cry at everything, It's one of the things that we very sensitive about. But the other thing it does is it creates a deeper level of connection that allows you to have honest conversations. And you're not, a lot of times we take superficial conversations and we make it mean something, right? So Sean and I are very honest with each other. We always kind of, I'm gonna say we give each other crap, because that's not what it is. That's what it would be at the superficial level. We actually tell each other, look, you should do it this way. Think about this. You should say this. Not should, like you're doing something wrong, but this is how we make each other better. We have these conversations on a regular basis, and it's how we started this whole podcast, because we were talking about, the special needs community, and we always say that what happens in the regular community is 10 times more, is more intense in the special needs community. For dads of children who have special needs issues, man, that vulnerability, like I don't want to talk about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so we've been able to break through that barrier and break through these kinds of conversations. And so the deep connection that you're talking about, which is actually the thing that every one of us craves, right? We cling to this connection with other folks in the digital age when we feel like there's less of a direct connection. Having these conversations are meaningful. To your point, check yourself and you get to check others. And Sean, the one thing that Sean does, and I'll say this, this is Love and Sean show today, is that he always says, I appreciate you and I love you, which men don't generally say to each other, but we feel it, but we just don't, man, they're like, yeah, I love you, man. But because he does that, I'm so conscious and aware of that. Like I say that to my kids.
Yeah.
I'll say it to all my kids, like, I love you. I appreciate you. I see what you're doing. And I love the respect the fight that you're going through. And I know what this struggle you're going through. And I promise could be like, we can have deeper, more meaningful connections with people around us, and especially as dads, right? But it starts in this kind of conversation. So my hats off to you. Kudos for you guys diving in 70 years, man. That is,
and you know who gets credit for that? It's my dad's message getting through to me. I've said this before on the show, and I've told you in private before, Brian, growing up in the Virgin Islands, man, my dad was about, my dad's always been a deep dude. And, his thing is like, look, I'm not always going to be here. You're not always going to be here. Your grandmother's not always going to be here. You got to let people know that you love them when you can. And, every day you're closer to dying. I'm like, dude, I am 12 and I'm trying to watch Scooby-Doo. I feel like the dude at the end of Scooby-Doo was like, yeah, I would get through this perfect day if it wasn't for you and your meddling metaphor,
Yeah.
But what happens is later in life, I understand what he was trying to tell me, which is that departure is not optional, right? So once you accept that departure is part of life, you get better at living life. So I'm better now at living it versus avoiding death. And I can't say that I'm over my quote unquote fear of death, but I think of all those things and what matters. I had some neighbors that moved out of our neighborhood, sold their home probably at least a year ago. I'm looking out the window today, look at the house, and I'm like, wonder how they're doing. And I just send them a text saying, just looked at your house. Wanted you guys to know that you're in my thoughts and prayers. Hope that all is well. I had a gentleman that I met probably maybe 10 years ago. We met at a car wash. We exchanged conversation, phone numbers, went to breakfast once. He was much more of an acquaintance than a friend. 3 days ago, he came to mind, and I couldn't even remember his first name, so I couldn't go through my phone to contact him. And I happened to see him pop up on Facebook as somebody because we're friends on Facebook, and it was his birthday. And I was like, and I put, happy birthday, long time no speak. But then I looked down at the rest of the stream, and his daughter a year ago had said, happy birthday in heaven. He had passed away. And then what I did is I wasn't friends with the daughter, and I sent her a note saying, hey, you don't know me, but I just want you to know, about a decade ago, I was sitting in a car wash, met this guy, blah, 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 blah. That was your dad. He was more of an acquaintance than a friend. We literally connected a few times, but he made a lasting impression on me. And I know how much he loved you, and he was just a very kind man. So, our connections with people and the impact they make upon us are huge. And so when you're thinking about somebody, let them know.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah.
It's something that's very profound. And it's something that I was going to lie right now and say I work on. I don't proactively work on it enough to really make a dent and have it become a habit, because I'm terrible at reaching out to friends, like people that I consider really good friends of mine.
Yeah.
If it's up to me, probably wouldn't speak to them until I actually saw them physically.
Can I tell you something?
Yeah.
In this, well, first of all, there's nothing that will ever replace face-to-face.
Physical, yeah.
The next best thing to that is voice and an actual phone call. Nothing will replace that. And in a day and age where technology seeks to, intentional or otherwise, separate us, it also serves to take our excuses away. So when you reach out to somebody, you just don't hear back from them, I use a term that applies like almost like in life insurance, where I'll say, look, barring the loss of life or limb, you ain't got no excuse to just shoot a text back to me if I reached out to you, say something. So by the same token, nothing will replace your voice. But if somebody crosses your mind, just be like, da 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 da, send that out, boom. And then the truth of the matter is, if they respond back, that's great. And my evolution has come from, I had a friend that I worked with in mortgages for 4 or 5 years. He was an older man, became a really good friend. Older Jewish gentleman. He came to our house for dinner. He was at our wedding and everything. And he just stopped communicating with me. And I don't know what happened. He left California, moved to Seattle and everything. And I had friends in common that said, that he was still fine. Then I was about to, blah, blah, blah. I thought of all of that. And then I let it go, because when I'm doing that, I'm reaching out to him so he can respond back. And I get the good feeling of having made his day.
Yeah.
I evolved from that to, I just want him to know that I was thinking of him,
Yeah.
So I happened to call one day and he finally answered the phone after a decade. And I just said, hey, I just want you to know that you matter. You've been my friend. I've always loved you and I always will. You don't have to call me back, but and if I never hear from him again, so be it. But I put it out there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we have to do when we let go. So
there's power. It's power.
Yeah.
In that.
With that,
I say,
go ahead.
If you, I was just gonna say, if you begin the practice, Manny, it easily becomes a habit, because you're gonna get a lot out of it. It makes it.
And don't get it twisted. This is the other thing I've learned. We talked earlier about not being, doing things before you're ready, but do it because it matters to you. Do it because it's noble. Do it because it has a chance, no matter how great or how small, to add value to somebody else's life. That's the reason to go do it, and not because you've mastered it. So what I share is my faults, my accomplishments, and my growth. But it, like the whole thing about being in touch and making that difference and everything, I have far from mastered that. There's no way. I accept, embrace, and value and enjoy and love that if I live for 1,000,000 years, I'll never stop learning, and I'm never going to be, I'll probably never be as close to perfect as I was the day I came out of my mother's womb. But the journey to try and get back there is immeasurable in value, just like each of us is.
100%.
Yeah.
So with that said, Manny, tell us
That's
about
it. We're done. I'm just kidding. This is stuff that we talk about, right? This is why it's important for dads to get together and just have these kind of real conversations, and just, it makes a difference in the lives of everybody around us.
I wanted to ask you this too.
Yeah,
because we have a friend of the show, a friend of ours, who's also a member of our men's group, support group, the Den, which is for male caregivers. It's a men's support group, and has and I want him to hopefully hear this too. He has an accessory or clothing line that is dad centric, but because of the way it's worded, and I won't state the name, it seems the intention is to shine a light on dads, but something about its name can unintentionally dim the light on mothers or anyone else. How did you come about with Fly Dad Gear? Tell us about that and the manner in which, again, it seems to be inclusive. And I know that it's like, for instance, guys have, backpacks, just like women may have purses or whatever have you. But I know there's more to it than that. So go ahead and tell us about that and how that came to be.
Yeah, that's interesting that you started that way, because I was struggling initially when we were thinking about the name of the company and just the mission behind it. Because when we developed it, my co-founder, which is a mom, and myself, we're very more so now than ever mission oriented people. And even in the businesses that we've established, we have thought about it from a mission purpose perspective before we really jumped into anything. And so we found that to be a very good starting point in order for you to really live true to the intention of what it is that you're trying to develop. Right. And how to name it in a way where it was from our perspective powerful for the father, not taking anything away from the mom, right?
Yeah.
And it was something that we did as far as how we communicated as well, because I'm of the belief, just from my travels, moms have an advantage over dads in the sense that they are able genetically, you name it, to flip a switch almost when they birth a child and adapt a lot easier than a father can.
Mhm.
And so I call that, I consider that to be an advantage. So I would never want to, I always think about it like now it's up to us dads to try to get up to that level and do our thing so that we can be a power couple. Or even if you're not together, still be a power parent couple, even if you're co-parenting or whatever the case is. So Fly Dad, the intention was like to instill confidence, right? When
Mhm.
you feel fly, think about this,
I
right?
love the backpacks that we're having on the screen right now, man. Those
Yeah,
are
thank
gorgeous.
you. I'll explain the inspiration behind that in a second, but
Yeah, I want one. Those are
when
nice.
I got you, I
All
got you.
right, right.
When if you come out of if I no longer have any, but when I used to get haircuts, right? I came out of that seat, out of the barber's chair when they did a really good job, and I was like on
Yeah.
another level, right?
Yeah.
So that little moment when you come out of that barber's seat and your confidence is up, everything is wonderful, right? And
Yeah.
so our intention is with Fly Dad, if we can instill that little bit of confidence, because you now have a backpack that kind of orients itself to you, right? As a father, everything has its place, and we got a lot of feedback from dads. They dislike the fact that the mom's bag is like the black hole, where everything is just thrown in. They know how to navigate it, but when you try to go get some butt paste or whatever, you're there throwing things out for 15 minutes. Like, I still can't find it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just practicality, style was a component of it, function, durability. So really did a lot of thinking about that and did a lot of research to understand what was working out there and what was missed. And when we came down to it, I was like, would I wear this in my moment of need when I had my children small? Is this going to solve my issue?
Mhm.
And it was a resounding yes. So we put it out to market, and that was in 2021 when we launched. And now 2024, we've sold a little over 2,000 bags, and these aren't
Beautiful.
cheap. Like, these are $170 bags. Like, I could understand
Wow.
somebody saying, I'm not spending that money on this thing. But we really tried our best to make it so that the value that the person receives is more than what they actually paid for.
And
And
it
we've
should
got
last for life.
and we have a lifetime warranty as well. So in the event that
Mm.
there is some issue, we take care of that without any question.
That goes
Beautiful.
back to several things I always say, which I always tell people: don't confuse cost with value. Those are two different things. And so many times
100%.
people will be like, what's it cost? What's it cost? What are you going to get out of it compared to what it is that you're going to have to give up? And you know what? I wish when Elijah's our youngest, he's the one that's on the spectrum. Everybody, most people, know my story. He's my only biological child. I have my wife's daughters from her previous marriage, and then my sister-in-law's children who we've adopted, as well. And when Elijah, being the youngest, was the last person that was dealing with like formula and all that kind of stuff, I had the black vinyl diaper bag, and I shouldn't see, even I had it. My wife, that's what she went out and got. I remember rocking that. I was never ashamed to do it, because if we're out and about and my wife's hands are full, I'll throw her purse on my shoulder.
That's right.
You know what I mean? But it does not look as fly as a Fly Dad backpack would look, and we're talking about vulnerability earlier. I don't know if you had this moment. This might be more suitable for your show than ours, but you talk about, I was just thinking of milk. When you're looking at the bag, I was thinking of, my wife, right? When Elijah was a baby, she was working. Her job didn't have her remote. She didn't work at home, so she had to go into an office. And that's when I had like just jumped into financial services. I've got this flexibility. I'll do so and so. And she came home from work one day, and I learned how precious breast milk is. Not because I tasted it, but because I had given him almost all there was that was in the fridge, because I was just like, oh, the boy's hungry. The boy's hungry. She came and she's like, what did you do? No, I called her at work, and I was like, I think that we're low on milk. She was like, what do you mean low? I was like, when he drank it all. What do you mean he drank it all? He didn't get up. He can't even walk. He didn't get up and go crack the fridge open and throw it back like a beer. How much did you give him? And it was way too much, and she freaked out, and I learned. So anyway.
Yeah, that thing doesn't grow on trees, Sean. What's wrong with you, man?
Yeah.
No, it does not. Not only that, I didn't realize. I realized at the time I learned if she's stressed, that affects production
Her-
or kills it
yeah.
altogether. You're like, wow. I need to keep my namaste going here, man.
So yeah,
So that's awesome. So you guys have done that. So, and is there more? Is it the backpacks are the main product? Is there entire product line?
It is currently. I mean, we've got like some shirts and hats and things like that, but it's not really something that we push too hard. It's really the backpack at the moment.
The caps are nice too, though. The baseball caps are nice. Don't sleep on that.
Yeah. People like those as well. But we're thinking about different opportunities because again, like the intention is trying to improve a dad's life incrementally, right? And try to help them throughout the different stages of them being a father as well. So
Yeah.
we're at the very early stages of it with this bag really catering to the newborn early stage of their life, but we're trying to develop some new and interesting things that can adapt to different levels of their lives.
Tell me something. When we had it on the screen earlier, I noticed the firstborn user guide. That's something that's actually a video. I didn't press play because I would rather hear what you got to say per se. But
Yeah.
what is when I saw that, just seeing what that means, got wheels turning in my head. Is that here's what I learned, here's what I wish I knew when I had an infant type of thing? Or tell us about that.
So I think that was the ebook that you might have glossed over. If it was the video, so we do have a video, but the video is about like how to use the backpack. It kind of takes you through a tour basically of like, here's where I would put this or that. But we do have like that's the packing video. So, but we do have kind of like these ebooks that we provide. Some, one of them in particular is about like, here's some of the things you got to look out for when you're about to have a child, all the way to like the do's and don'ts of raising a kid for you to consider, that kinds of stuff.
Okay, all right,
interesting.
Yeah, it's got me thinking. Yeah, it's got me thinking a lot, quite frankly. Yeah,
good.
I'm taking military. Yeah.
And Manny, in addition to Fly Dad Gear and the Fatherhood podcast, what are you like? What are you building? Like, where are you going?
Yeah. It's a very interesting question. It's actually something that I try to spend meaningful time thinking about every week, because people don't really give enough importance to actually spending time thinking. It's a very important tool.
Sure.
But I consider myself a dad-trepreneur, and I look at it on several almost like different layers, right? So I'm a big basketball guy. I know in the green room we were talking about that, but
yeah,
I love the NBA, don't get me wrong, and I'm a huge Knicks fan, but my heart is in the high school basketball realm. Like I went to a high school, shout out to St. Raymond High School in the Bronx, where I was exposed to high caliber high school athletes that looked like grown men that just came out of prison.
Wow.
Like these dudes were like yacked and they can hoop their tail off. And I just was in complete awe. I didn't realize that like going from 8th grade to 9th, there was such a huge departure.
Huge.
And so I fell in love with it then, and I disconnected from my high school for a while just because I was not living in the area. But when I moved back, I made it a point to go back and watch high school ball. And I noticed, and again, it kind of goes back to fatherhood at the end of the day, because I noticed, especially, unfortunately in urban areas, you see this more prevalent. There's the absence of the father for whatever reason, right?
Yeah.
And I noticed a very strong connection to some of these athletes, and just the nature of being an athlete and being a really good one. At some point throughout the journey, whether you're Michael Jordan or the guy who was a high school standout but basically flunked out of college and really didn't get to the next level,
right?
Their confidence goes from all the way up here down to the floor.
Because it's everything about them is attached to that. It's they don't know anything else about who they really are.
Exactly. And a lot of these kids that I'm referring to start out at a disadvantage because they don't have the dad typically around enough to at least help shape them as a formal couple could, right? Or parenting duo can.
Right.
And I look at that. So one of the things I hope to be able to do as part of this dad work that I try to do is really carve out a path for high school athletes where they're being taught financial literacy, emotional intelligence, and entrepreneurship in a very early stage to complement their education and their ascent in sports. So that when things don't align anymore, whether that be retirement or whatever from the sport, they still have a solid foundation that they can pick up and move forward with. And I don't care how many millions of dollars you might earn, in a professional sport, those fundamentals are lacking quite substantially.
Not only that. No, go ahead.
No. I was just saying, I feel like for me, it's one of those things that just called me. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but you're going to do it. How most of my life has worked out. But somehow it's going to work out and I'm going to figure it out.
And again, several things to piggyback on that. Why you're going to do it is more important than how. If you know why, you'll figure out how, or how will figure you out. Number one. Number two, there is immeasurable value in someone, regardless of gender, being told whether you win or lose at the end of the day, I still love you, but I want you to give everything you've got. Because if you don't have someone that tells you that and you fail, obviously you fail and then you fall as well, right? And it's not like you fall forward and fall and learn. You fall, period, because you feel, okay, now I'm not loved because everything was tied to that success. But then by the same token, if you overcome that absence and achieve success, then you'll be successful and not fulfilled. Because the only thing worse than, not having anything is having everything and a carrot dangling in front of you. So in other words, if you got all these millions and you've got what is defined by the eyes of most as success, but you don't have fulfillment, which because there's somebody telling you that they love you regardless, then you got all kind of carrots hanging in front of you and holes inside of you. So that's tremendous. It's huge.
Yeah. Well, I also think it points to the value that coaches and teachers play in the lives of our children as they're going through this. And my youngest son's almost 17. My youngest child, my son's almost 17. And I coached him in baseball from the time he was 6 years old. And, then when he went to, he's in high school and playing high school ball. And so I was on the board of the board of the baseball club and did the announcements and played the music and, in between because, I want to be, always supportive of him. And also the other players who, I notice when their families aren't there rooting them on. I know what it's like when I was a baseball player, when I was young, my folks didn't show up to games and that had a lasting impact on me. So, I was made it a thing to call out those kids and just tell them how you did a great job. You did great at this. You're amazing at that. I do announcement. I would announce these kids and, highlight something that they've done, make them feel seen, make them feel heard and gotten. And, it really does make a difference. And I was going to say this, and I know we've sort of taken over this entire conversation, man. And we usually don't talk as much.
That's all good. I'm enjoying it.
Good. And I think you'll appreciate this too. I was watching this show this weekend, and they called out this guy as his. I had to write it down because it was so great. He's the twice divorced supplement salesman from Tampa. That's what they call Tom Brady. The twice divorced supplement salesman now from Tampa. That's what
they call him that at the roast.
You were watching the roast.
That on the roast. Yeah, but the value of there was so much. The roast was kind of filled with a whole bunch of craziness there, but there's some really amazing stories there. Randy Moss is one of the greatest receivers in the game. 3 years with New England, the 3 years that they didn't win a ring, and that's a burr in his side that he didn't have a ring, during that period of time, and he was like calling out the guys who you've never heard of, who have a ring, and more importantly that. Drew Bledsoe, got injured and was in the hospital, and that's what gave Tom Brady the opportunity. And they all joked about it, including Drew Bledsoe, about like I gave Tom Brady the start because, I got hurt. And, Tom Brady gave it back to him and said, and I got you a ring while you were in the hospital. So, you're welcome. But it is kind of amazing because when your career is over, what do you do? Right. He's young enough. Right. I was one of the greatest football players to play the game, one of the greatest quarterbacks. But for all these guys that play sports, where sports is a bonding experience. It's an opportunity to excel at the next level, Even him, he was sixth round. He was a sixth-round pick coming out of college. You may excel at one level, and then when you get to the next level, you drop down again until you can kind of prove yourself. Right. And so I think what you're saying is, if we can support these kids at the high school level and and continue to light the fire and keep them, keep their heads on, and all that stuff you mentioned, financial literacy and entrepreneurship, that's stuff that Sean and I talk about on a daily basis in our business. That is an effort worth supporting across the board, across this country.
Where are you in building that bridge, Manny?
Oh man, just still in the
Infancy.
Theoretical phase. I talk to people about it. I'm just not ready to even get it off the starting block just yet. Mm-hmm. But it is something near and dear to me that I definitely want to tackle at some point.
Can you hear that?
Yeah.
No.
I heard it.
Do you hear that noise right now? Brian already knows what it is, man. Those are the wheels. You hear that?
Yeah.
Those are the wheels in my head turning. Yeah.
Okay. I thought you were saying that's the excuse train coming. I thought that's where you were going.
No. If it is, I'm derailing it because I've driven it before, so I know.
No, if anything, it's the other thing. It's the train where let's jump. I'll jump on board on that train. I'm a fan. I think you are onto something significant. I don't think it's something. I'm just giving you some support and validation and acknowledgement. That is an area where we can make a huge difference in the lives of our kids. And not when I say our kids, I mean our collective kids, all of the kids of our future. Because I have to say, and not to make this political, but with what's going on in college campuses, there's been an infiltration of certain kinds of education that doesn't seem to be based in the stuff that is where we come from, right? What this country is based on. Yep. And we're talking about supporting our children and giving them the tools to get to the next level. This is an opportunity. This is a great place for us to start because then we get that creative thinking. We get that critical thinking. We get that idea of learn the history, learn, not to repeat the mistakes, but to repeat those things that are going to make us successful. And let's learn from the mentors who have been there. So I'm a fan. I'm on board. Where you decide you do it, you want some support, some help, advisors, whatever. Well, I'm in. Here. So I think that's valuable. Yeah. And I know Sean and I feel the same way.
And just to add a final point to that, the way I look at it again, I chose high school. Yes, I'm a passionate fan of the sport of basketball at the high school level, but I also you could play this out over 10, 15 years, right? And then you see kind of where things end up. It's the repetition of the cycle in a lot of cases. These guys tend to, and I say guys because it's usually the boys basketball teams that I'm following, but they'll end up, having children, not really being around for them. That's again redoing the whole thing that was done to them. And when you are able to fortify a child with the confidence, support, emotional support, and just really be about them and give them these tools and these platforms, the percentages increase tremendously of the responsible, societal figures that we need in our men to shape and mold these children to make society as a whole a much more improved situation. So
definitely
it's a benefit that goes way beyond just that micro family. It impacts prison rates, everything, right?
Yeah, you impact the lives of people not yet even born.
Exactly. And then you think 100%. About how you walk down the street and people are scared for their lives today, right? No matter almost wherever you go. And this particular solution or potential solution lowers the risk of stuff like that just for everyday citizens, right? So it's really important in my mind. Like everything that we're talking about, just us being present fathers to our children has a huge benefit to the society that we live in.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yes, I'm in. and what happens is, last thing I'll say, because then we're going to ask you this important question, but the last thing I was going to say is, when you see somebody who's been supported from the time that they were young, and especially when it comes to sports, you don't realize that person, to your point, look at what Caitlin Clark has done for women's basketball. And I don't mean, and by the way, the first thing that she did when she, after the championship and she got drafted, was acknowledge the Lisa Leslie's, the all of the gals who had come before her to set the path.
Yeah.
And she's just furthering it and expanding it. Imagine the little girls who are aspiring to then get to that next level now that have, their new hero, the impact, because she was supported by folks from the time she was a little girl, in sports, to move on to what you're saying, because you're going to have could have a massive impact.
Yeah.
And so
it's beautiful to see. And that's kind of what, like, I think sometimes Caitlin Clark's attitude, the way I see it, is not great, but I don't know her. I'm only judging her based on short moments. But the whole totality of what I've seen so far in her journey, I think is beautiful. And it's a humongous benefit to sports. The league she's entering into now, like all this stuff is going to be really cool.
And it's interesting. You were saying earlier something about taking time to think about or to think, right? Consciousness is raised when we think about what we think about, right? And most people don't do that. And I find myself doing that now when, unlike when I was younger. Like there's certain things, like you said, about her attitude you might be not be crazy about. And I'm like, well, what is it about that I don't necessarily like? Is it because she's a woman? If she was a guy, would she be entitled to or given the opportunity to quote unquote flex maybe just a little more? And then when I think about it, I'm also like, if I was 19 or 20 years old and I'm killing people on the court, I wouldn't be quite as humble as she is. You know what I mean? At least on the court, because one thing, because the way I am, like, this would surprise Brian, the way I am off a court is like one thing. I got on a basketball court, and it can change you, especially if I'm the guy go out there, man. Because and listen, I'd be out there and I'm not the most talkative guy or whatever have you, like initially. And what I would have is, because I'm an easygoing person, people who kind of want to try and maybe like kind of pick on me or punk me or whatever have you. And that would bring out the beast in me, man. I mean, I'd say things and people would be like, what's wrong? What happened to him? So if I was in her shoes, you talking back and forth, oh my gosh, but it's something else.
That's a great point. I didn't even consider.
Oh yeah, because I already know.
She's like an animal on the court, because that's where she wants to be an animal, and that makes perfect sense.
And competition does that to you.
But then the comments that she makes off the court, and the acknowledgement of those that have come before her, and that are, I mean, she acknowledged the UConn coach. She acknowledged her other players that she's played against. She's acknowledged those that she's playing with. Like, you don't do that if you're so completely self-centered, right? If you're only focused on the internal. So
that's true.
Anyway, listen, we can talk about this. We've got so much we can talk about. And we say this every week. We're like, another hour has gone by. I'm like, how the heck did that happen so fast? So before we go, we ask you a question that I'm really anxious to hear your answer to this, because this has been an incredible conversation so far. Sean.
Yes. And like Brian said, you've, I don't know what it is. You've inspired us to speak today. We don't usually talk this much. We're like trying to share the light. We're like running the whole show, running you over. Sorry, man.
I'm a podcaster too, man. I try to get people to talk. So that's what I do.
The best. Yeah, right. Well, you did that today. Well, this is the portion of the show where, with context, here's what we'll say. Our ability to change the world, because we're all about trying to make the world a better place. Muhammad Ali said, our service to others is the rent we pay for our room on earth, right? So with that said, our ability to change the world is based upon our ability or willingness to change ourselves. So with that said, give us just one example. If you can think of two, that's fine. But just at least one example of a thought or a belief that you really held dearly, really believe strongly, but no longer believe to be true?
I mean, this is probably going to be really simple, but it's something we've touched on throughout this conversation, just about the vulnerability, right? The being having the permission to be vulnerable as a man has been super taboo, and for a long time, something that I just thought was not acceptable, right?
Mhm.
Just from my upbringing and the surroundings I've been in. And I still struggle with this, but like something as simple as crying, right? I
Mhm.
literally had a conversation about this earlier today, and I was talking to a couple of women, and we were just talking about how do we cope with the ups and downs of entrepreneurship. And one of the ladies said, you know, that day that I was going through feeling this, I just started my day crying, and I allowed myself the space to cry. And I was like, damn, I'm so envious, because I had a moment like that not that long ago, and I started to tear up, and I was like, and then I found myself bad talking myself. What are you doing? Why are you crying? What's there to cry about? What are you da, da, da? And then it just hit me. I was like, I do this to my kids. I do this to my kids, and it's not fair. And so just that, acknowledging that that is not um, a true thing, right? That it's actually, I would argue it's the opposite. If you are able to know yourself well enough to allow yourself to let go that way,
Mhm.
and let that, and that's a very healthy experience. So I aspire to get to that point, working on that one proactively, but
Good.
it's one of those myths or whatever that I
That's,
grew up thinking was just not
yeah,
acceptable.
that's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Nobody ever tells you, nobody ever cries and goes, I feel worse now.
That's true.
You might not
Yeah.
feel better depending on what you're crying about, but you're not going to feel worse. You know,
I was at a funeral once for one of my an uncle of mine passed, and it was, I mean, it's a sad, very sad day. You're never going to see this person again, right? And I remember feeling, after bouts of cries, a, a sense of relief. And I was like, I should not feel like this. I felt like I was doing something wrong feeling this way.
Mm.
And I almost tried to suppress it. But to your point, like, yeah, you're right. Like, nobody's ever gonna be like, oh no, I feel worse.
listen,
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor, so I can't tell you what the chemicals are, but there are chemicals in our body that we produce that are released when we shed tears. The chemical content of tears of joy is said to be different from the chemical content of tears of sorrow. So
Mm.
therefore, if you pay attention, this goes back to consciousness again. If you pay attention to how you feel, pay attention to how you think, pay attention to how you feel. Live a little less on autopilot. Some autopilot is good, but everything shouldn't be like you pull up to your apartment complex or your driveway or your home, and this part of you that doesn't know how you got there. All you know is that you didn't run lights, right? Because it's so automatic. Think about where you're going and the steps you take. And if you take inventory of how you feel after you've released some tears, you're kind of like, you see the difference. So tears are just as strong as as biceps. Letting go is just as valuable as picking up the weights. And you don't gain muscle by lifting cotton, right? You need to go ahead and lift things that challenge you. And if there's a challenge in crying, it takes more work to keep it inside.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When it's
It
coming.
does.
So
More effort.
let it go, let it do its thing, and sit back and ask questions. And there's a whole another thing we can get into, which could be an entire topic for a show. But we close by saying, questions are more powerful than statements, and the quality of our life is usually tied to the quality of the questions that we ask ourselves. So get good at asking those questions and let it all go.
Yeah. This is good stuff. Again, we can keep going, but we have to come to an end because the folks at WSTX AM radio would be like, why are you guys still talking? So with that, Manny, this has been a great conversation. Folks, check out the podcast, fatherhoodspod.com, and flydadgirl.com as well for awesome Fly Dad gear. Thanks everybody for listening, catching us on Facebook and on our YouTube channel. Please again, leave comments, subscribe, like, share with your friends. Thanks for listening to us on podcast outlets and again on the radio down in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Thank you, Sean Hall in Hawaii, for keeping us on track, and Dad Billy's Footwear for always being a big fan and support of what we're doing. We've got a form on our site, so go to our website, or go to our website, just2dadspodcast.com. I'm just saying that now, Sean. And or email us at wearejust2dads@gmail.com. But you'll find the den. Sign up for the den. It's free to join our men's group, caregivers of children or family members with special needs issues. We meet every other Sunday on Zoom for an hour. So join us. We'd love to have you. Did I catch everything? Yeah, I think we put everything in the web.
Sure did.
In the show notes. And with that, I'm going to say empathy and love. Always, always, always be empathetic. You never know what's somebody's going through. And look at the world through lenses of love. It makes a difference in the world. And Sean, you're going to sign us off today. And Manny, thank you again. Awesome.
Yeah. Manny, I just want to thank you. You know, they say that coincidences are God's way of remaining anonymous. And so there's no coincidence that we were able to be brought together here today. Thank you so very much. Thank you to any and everyone within the sound of my voice for supporting us as we continue to grow this platform that I'm just so honored and blessed to be a part of. And remember, we don't need to dim somebody else's light in order for ours to shine. Questions are more powerful than statements. Let's try and be a little bit more childlike and less childish. And wherever you might be within the sound of my voice, again, thank you so much. And we love you. Manny, don't go anywhere. Stick around with us for a bit.
We love you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Catch you next week.